Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, you know me. My name is Dr. Keith McNally. This is Coach's Corner. I'm here with Carol Banens, and I make sure that I get names right because it's so important. Carol, welcome to the conversation. Welcome to the call.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
So, based on your accent, you are from the UK, but you're not living in the UK?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm from the UK, but I live in Canada, in Ottawa.
Well, fantastic. And so, how are things up in Ottawa today?
They're a bit windy today. We had very hot weather last week, and now it's nicer. It's not quite as hot.
Well, I appreciate that. Now, to give everybody in our audience some inclination as to what this conversation is going to be about, you shared your personal story on the Question Guy podcast. So I'm going to share that link in the description of this video. You are not just a coach, you are what else? So, what's your professional space?
Well, I was a physiotherapist, a physical therapist. For those of you in the States, that's my background of 38 years, but I'm a certified grief educator and a grief coach.
And real quickly, how did you get into that space? Because again, I'm going to share your backstory, but
Yeah.
why is this space so valuable to you?
It's valuable because the grief journey I went on after my husband died was so difficult. I didn't know it was going to be that difficult. And it took me a while to get to this space. I was going to be a coach for midlife women and a pain coach, but I arrived in the grief coaching niche or area because that was right. It felt right. It felt like I landed and it felt like I had something really beneficial to offer because I've gone on that journey.
Now, there are many people out there in the world who don't like what that feels like.
Yeah.
So we suppress it, we
Yeah.
hold it, we deny it.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. I was one of those people. So
Isn't
I can't,
everybody?
yeah, we might be. And I think primarily because there is either, well, there could be a combination of variables. So I'm just going to spit some things out. Lack
Mm.
of information,
Yeah.
lack of comfort, and a
Yes.
lack of socialization in the fact that this is really just normal. We treat it so abnormal that it just becomes this enigma
Yes.
out there.
All of
But
that. All of
but
that.
you in your professional space
Mhm.
create a space for somebody to come to you to change all of that. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. Because society thinks you should hurry up and get over it aren't you back to normal? And of course you don't get back to normal. Need somebody who understands the process of grief, that actually it is a normal thing. We'll all go through it. But how do we start to relate to ourselves without our loved one? How
Mm.
do we relate to society, our jobs, those around us, our family? So when people come to me, what I do is really help them have permission to grieve because society doesn't,
Mm.
and permission to feel their emotions. What are emotions? Is anger bad? No, it's just an emotion. So we have to talk about emotions. We have to allow them. And from my physio background, I know that when we suppress emotion, it gets stuck in our body. And people used to come to me in chronic pain. Well, guess what? A lot of it was emotional pain. And that with grief, we know that about 10% of psychiatric illnesses can be linked back to unresolved grief.
Mm.
That's a pretty high number. So if I can get to people early and say, this is normal, this is not normal, this is the sort of trajectory, bearing in mind everybody is different and it has a
Mm.
different experience, but there are some commonalities that if we understand them, it makes it a little less hard to journey through it.
People struggle with the word normal.
Hmm.
So in your framework,
Yeah.
what is normal in terms of grief, in the
In
grief
terms,
journey?
in terms of the grief journey, that there is sadness, but I think there's the physicality of grief. I didn't know about that. I didn't know that I would be forgetful, that I couldn't read, that I couldn't focus, I couldn't concentrate. All of these things, because grief is a whole body experience. And I don't
Mm.
think people realize that. They know they're going to be sad, they're going to miss the person. These are the obvious things. Your immune system is depressed. The likelihood of, illness just after losing somebody that you've loved is higher. So when we understand all this, we can do better self-care, we can be more understanding, we can give ourselves grace. And as we educate others, they understand and can support better. So normal in grief is a myriad of things because you're not all going to do the same thing. You won't all feel the same thing. Some people will feel anger, some won't. Some will feel guilt, some won't. But just knowing that these things are normal to experience is helpful, I think.
I so appreciate the fact that you said, and this isn't more paraphrased, and it's a whole body experience.
Mm,
It's a mind, body, spirit, emotion. There's physical symptomologies. There's the feelings. It can get rather one overwhelming, but confusing all at the same time
yes.
because we may want to attribute how we're feeling, you know, upset stomach,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
do I
That could be
attribute it to,
grief.
yeah, do I attribute it to my lunch I just ate that didn't agree with me,
Yeah.
or there's something going on? Um, for example, I had a heart attack. This isn't
Mm,
necessarily related directly to grief, but
yeah.
I attribute it. Maybe I'm just having some indigestion. you know, it's
Well,
so difficult to navigate what's going on. How do you help people? This is where I was going with the question. How
yeah.
do you help people kind of hone in and say, this is really what we should be looking at?
Well, I think that's education, isn't it? So any of my clients are going to get a lot of education, and I do that on social media. Did you know this is something that you can feel in grief? One of them is heart pain and chest pain, something called Takotsubo syndrome, broken heart syndrome. We've all heard of an old couple, one dies and a week later the other dies, and people say, oh, it must have been a broken heart. Yeah, it was probably. The left ventricle expands and people can die. No, it's rare. But having heart palpitations, having a changed respiratory rate, all of these things are normal. So when somebody says, I feel like I'm going mad, I can go, I know, and you're not. These are things that will crop up in grief. You may have all of them or none of them or one of them and at different times. And so
So,
once they understand that, they don't feel as scared.
and I like that. And I think people really need to embrace that it's going to be challenging, but it doesn't
Mhm.
need to be scary.
Yeah,
And so let's talk about that journey. And of course, individual as it can be, because
yeah,
everybody has their own
yeah.
pathway. But what are some of the things that you help people kind of you educate them on and then bring them to some type of, well, I was going to ask, is there a type of resolution or we just find ways of living with it? Air
It's such
quotes.
a great question. I think it's a case of integrating the grief. Having now been 6 years into the journey, you never, if you've loved someone, whoever that may be, you don't stop loving that person ever. So how do we, I think one of the things I like to do is to show people that they can move forward in their life without guilt or the fear that they're letting go of their loved one. They can still love their loved one even though they're physically not here. And then how do we do that? Do we do that with photos, memories, talking about them?
Hmm.
One of the mistakes people often make when they're with grievers is they think, I better not mention the name of the dead person because it'll upset them. Well, actually, they're upset enough. You're not going to upset them anymore. Most people want to talk about their loved one and share their stories. That keeps their spirit alive. So, how do we move forward in life whilst honoring the person that died? That's a big part of it, so that you feel you can move forward. I think there's a lot of fear that if I let go, if I do anything, if I laugh, if I move forward and go out, oh, I'm going to forget my loved one. And I think it's about really reassuring people that you can do both. You can grieve, you can honor your loved one, and you can still move forwards in life. And that's integration to me.
So I know some folks who have lost loved ones, whether it be
Mhm,
mom, dad, brother,
mhm.
sister, or spouse, and they have used some type of creative experience. And so, whether it be music or writing, whatever they typically tap into, they suppress it for a while because they think it's wrong, for them to re-engage in something
Yes.
that they
Yeah.
enjoy in.
Yeah.
But then when they have that coaching experience or that therapeutic experience. And I like the word that you used earlier because I use it quite frequently, permission. Because
Yeah,
sometimes we typically no longer give ourselves permission to move forward.
we don't.
Do you find that when you give permission to your clients to be their creative self again,
Mhm.
does that kind of help in the healing?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I give them journal prompts, or I'll say, this week, think about or write a letter to. So, yes, but not everybody's a creative writer. I didn't know I was, but that ended up being my creative expression for my emotions. And I think this is such a great point because somehow we have to deal with these emotions. For me, it was writing poetry. Somebody else, it might be making music. Somebody else, it may be painting, but something to try and express yourself when you can't maybe use the words out loud,
Mm.
just a different way. So, but it can, yes, it can be oh, I shouldn't really be painting because I like painting. And maybe that means I'm not sad. I think we have to understand that you can be sad, you can be grieving, and you can have these little drops of joy. It's okay to do that and not to feel guilty about it.
And so, through the pathway of healing, you
Mhm.
earlier mentioned the word integration. And I want you to be able to kind of flesh that out a little bit. Help me at the very least, because I know I'm listening. But for those who are watching and listening to this conversation, what would integration look like or should look like?
For me, what that means is that you can live your life, you can allow the griefs to be present, a companion with you, but not define you. So you're living life, you're going to have those days, those anniversaries where it pops up that, of course, oh, it was my loved one's birthday. You're going to feel a pang of grief. It gets less. But for people who have not integrated their grief, they very much live in the past. If
Mm.
only I could have done this. If only he was still here. I'm never going to enjoy my life again. If you keep doing that, you're not integrating it and allowing yourself to live. And I really think the thing is, we have that privilege of a life left to live. How are we going to live it? I don't think we want to die along with the person that died. And so I think we have to learn to carry our grief along with life and joy as well. That for me is integration. Did that answer it?
I love it. I want to tap into just a little bit, if you're comfortable
Mhm.
with this part of the conversation, the spirituality
Yeah,
of grieving. I'm learning more and more every day. And even though I grew up under some religious doctrine, Catholicism and
yeah.
Christianity, and I know, although I no longer adhere to those values specifically, I address the idea that we are still spiritual in nature, that there is an essence about us that moves beyond the physical nature of us. Do you actually, in your coaching, address that at all, or how does that work in the coaching
Yes, it's
process?
it's a really interesting question because I'm very much like you. I feel there's a spiritual nature, but I think you have to tread very carefully and respectfully for people's beliefs because some people believe they're Catholics or Jewish or whatever, Muslim, and other people are like, no, you die, and that is that. I'm thinking of a client right now who believes that's it. And I said, one of the really fascinating things is that we now know in our brain that our loved ones, when you've been with somebody a long time, we actually create neural networks for them. So I said, how does it feel to you to feel like that maybe they're physically not here, but they're actually encoded in your brain. So they're with you all the time. And she said, oh, that's so comforting. So it was science, but it's still for me, it's a spirituality in a sense, but it's how can you help somebody, whoever that is, in their realm, in their understanding of death, spirituality. Not everybody believes in spirituality, and you have to honor that. I think that's really important. But I can bring the science in that maybe brings comfort in a different way, which I love.
So I'm going to use the word integration now in
Yeah.
this conversation. I love how you've integrated that idea, because our brains are such a dynamic organ in our body and we don't fully understand it. But you are right in the sense that when we are experiencing life our brain does create these neural pathways,
Yeah.
neurolinguistic pathways
Yeah.
to be more precise, that encodes somebody's look, their smell, their behaviors, their words, their image.
Yeah.
So they will always be a part of your memory. And so to honor that memory has to be a powerful thing. Yes?
I think so. I think so. And I think that's part of the comfort you can give somebody when you can give them some science-backed stuff like that. So it doesn't sound woo-woo. It's like, yeah, no, they're gone. They're physically gone, of course. And yet, not necessarily, because we know with fMRI scanners, we know what happens in the brain. And so there are these neural networks of your loved one in there. They're with you. And I think that's comforting. They're always with you.
To me, it's very comforting. So
Mhm.
to close out this conversation, or before we actually end it,
Yeah.
you know what's coming. I want you to give our audience something that they can kind of hold on to if they are dealing with grief
Yeah.
or the loss of something. And it doesn't necessarily have to pertain to a person. We could
Hmm.
grieve over the loss of anything that's
Yeah.
of value to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
So before you give away your contact information, tell
Yeah.
them what they
Yeah.
need to do today.
Okay, let's do this. So there's a really being called RAIN. It's from Tara Brach, who is a mindfulness expert. And think of the acronym RAIN. So let's say you're feeling very sad, you're very overwhelmed, it's just awful right now in your grief. RAIN, R is recognize the emotion that you're feeling. So
Mm.
I'm feeling really sad. A is acknowledge it. Don't push it away. Acknowledge, yeah, I'm feeling sad. Acknowledge and accept it. Then I is investigate it. Where do I feel that in my body? Wow, I'm feeling really tight across my chest, or I feel butterflies in my stomach. And sit with it. Does it have a color? Does it have a texture? Don't push it away. Just breathe into whatever that emotion is and where you feel it, and then nurture it. Maybe put your hand like I am on my heart, let it be, and just let it be. And I think that is a really beautiful technique, the rain technique, for really sinking into an emotion that you perhaps don't want. It's not about changing it, it's about being with it. And it's a safe way of doing it because in the end, you're nurturing it. And I think that's beautiful. I use that with my clients.
I love it. I fully appreciate it. You have taught me something new,
Oh, good.
and I will use that. And of course, they usually say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but you
Ah,
just did, and so I fully appreciate that. How
you're
can
welcome.
people find you? Where are you on the social media platforms? Where are you on the web?
Okay, you can go to my website, www.carolbanens.com. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel, again, called Carol Banens. The YouTube channel, for any of you listening, has lots of really short videos, 3 to 5 minutes on grief, different aspects of grief. So please go there. If you go to my website, you can download a free Ease Your Grief Burst meditation. And I have a book, Kintsugi Your Heart, The Art of Living with Grief poetry. So there are lots of places you can find me and connect with me.
Then I will have all of those links in the description of this video. Carol, thank
I
you.
have one more. I have one more. I forgot.
Oh, go
Oh, I
for it.
have an online grief cafe that is on the first Thursday of every month. It's free. It's next Thursday, July the 4th. So if anybody's grieving, you can just come along, come for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. Come and talk, share your grief story, because it's in the sharing and the witnessing of the grief that you get support. So it's free. Just come along online.
Carol, thank you so much. For
So
those of you who are watching and listening,
welcome.
I'll see you next time. Take care.